Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Holcomb. I'm the curator at the Moss Arts Center, and thank you for gathering on this Friday morning to welcome Charisse, Pearlina, Weston, and Shaunté Gates for the opening of their two solo exhibitions. So I'm going to read a brief bios for both artists before we start in the questions. So, Shaunté Gates lives in Washington, D.C. He's trained in traditional oil painting and portraiture. His experience as a tattoo artist and television editor and motion graphics artist with BET caused a profound shift in his artistic practice, transforming it into mixed and multimedia works incorporating elements of motion and world building, exploring the influence of mass media on society and introspection. Gates was a participating artist in the Smithsonian Institute Men of Change, a 4-year traveling exhibition spanning 10 museums, including the California African American Museum, the Cincinnati Underground Railroad Museum, and Washington State History Museum. He's had many public art commissions from schools throughout D.C., including Transcending, a painting commemorating the 140th anniversary of Howard University School of Law. Gates has been awarded the Lewis Comfort Tiffany Biennial Grant, residencies with the Nicholas Project, the Kennedy Center, and the Washington Project for the Arts. Gates, his works included in collections at the Studio Museum in Harlem and Munson in Utica, New York. Recent solo exhibitions include In the Light of the Hunt at Speroni Westwater, New York, and Poppies and Parachutes, We Should Be Flying by Now, at the Zudon Buzon Gallery in Paris. Basu. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Charisse Pearlina Weston is a conceptual artist who works across sculpture, writing, installation, and photography. Her works utilize techniques such as concealment, repetition, enfoldment, and posits Black interior life as a central site of Black resistance. Weston holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of North Texas, a Master's of Science in Modern Art from the University of Edinburgh, and a Master's of Fine Art and Studio Art from the University of California in Irvine. She is also alumni of the Whitney Museum of American Art's Independent Study Program. Weston was awarded a Creative Capital Grant in 2024 as Artist in Residence at the Studio Museum in Harlem and was named a 2023 Jerome Hill Fellow, a Hodder Fellow at the Lewis Center for the Arts at Princeton University. She was also awarded the Burke Prize by the Museum of Modern Art and Design. And recent solo exhibitions include the Project Row Houses, the Moody Center for the Arts at Rice University, as well as the Queens Museum. So thank you all for coming in. So I wanted to start off today by talking about the works in the show, and each of you have presented a different body. Shaunté's is more like a 10-year survey of work, and Charisse's, many of these works is the first time that we've seen them here at the Moss. So Shaunté, I wanted to start off with how your work blends photography, painting, and collage, and found materials in these layered compositions. And if you could just begin by describing your creative process and how these elements come together in the studio.
Sure. Well, I'll take you, since you have this piece up, I think this piece is a good way to get into how the work works. I'm a painter first. I've always painted, and this piece here was a pivotal piece when I started really incorporating photography into my paintings. I had worked in television for 10 years, and towards the end of my tenure there, I made this piece in 2013. And so it was a combination of 3 different pieces here. And that's typically how I work. I work on multiple pieces at one time so that they feed each other. So you have a piece that started off with a painting of the sky, and separately I had these photos of that from a photo shoot I had did with a friend, and it was inspired by a a piece I did for Howard University School of Law depicting Lady Justice, this blindfold had became this motif in my work. So I revisited that blindfold and was thinking of it on multiple levels, thinking about, so there's always this duality. So the influences of mass media on society was the thing I was thinking about, and this level of introspection happening at the same time. I had realized that the influences that television had on my paintings and and vice versa, the paintings had on my digital work that I was doing for television. So, and there was something really interesting there about this conflict that I was having. So during the day, I'm working in television, creating these motion graphics and editing for these programs, and I was thinking about, like, when I'm painting at night, so I'm coming home and I'm painting, and the paintings had to deal with themes of, so I'm looking into society of the spectacle, and you know, just how propaganda flourished during World War II, Edward Bernays, and just digging in. And so at night, it's like I'm critiquing propaganda and mass media, and then the day I'm like working in the machine. So it was this interesting contradiction that I embraced, and so started doing video works, and this piece is, it's that piece that really culminates that whole experience for me, you know. And like I said, when I did it, there was like even the straight jackets, blindfold, I'm thinking of, like, you think outside this box, how society deems you as crazy, and you have this duality happening with this blindfold. That was a separate piece from the scene that was there. But once I printed the photo out of my friend and put it on that sky, there was a truth there that I couldn't deny. So I just had to roll with it and trust it. And that's pretty much how the process is. It's really trying to find, you know, the studio is filled with pieces of print media. You know, I'm throwing paint, the pieces start off really abstract, and I'm trying to find my way through them. So I started putting pieces up there, ripping them down, and that, you know, tearing pieces, deconstructing the pieces, that became more a part of the process after working in television, actually. And I think it was a way for me to, there was something I didn't like about the pieces, even that piece when it was the previous, yeah, something really clean about it. And that came from, I realized that it came from working in graphics. Like, everything had to be precise, clean, and on time. So there was a lot, there's a lot of complexities there, things that, like I said, like that part, it disturbed me a little bit. So I really just started to take the layers off and build back up, and I don't know. And that's just how the process, so I'm still to this day, still trying to find my way out of that box, if you will. So you see with this piece here, it's more layers involved, you know, you don't know. And so I'm just trying to find my way through the works. That's pretty much how it works, you know. I'm not really trying to tell a story, but I'm trying to find that story, you know? Mm-hmm. And, yeah.
Yeah, and the two pieces I just showed kind of show it's like a 10-year gap
Absolutely.
In between. Because the piece that we're looking at now is from last year, and the first piece that we showed, This Is Not a Test, which your show takes the title from, was like from 2014.
2000, yeah.
2014 and
yeah.
everything. So, Charisse, I mean, the central, like, surveillance is a big focus of your work, and the manipulation of mirror-plane surveillance glass portrays a kind of a central role. How did you discover this material, and what inspired to transform it into a medium of resistance?
So I have been doing research on essentially like the materiality of glass, and it's kind of, I guess it's the history of its use in society, and it's the different symbolic registers that it's kind of passed through across time. And that kind of led me to start thinking about the ways in which glass is a kind of central component of surveillance technologies. And as a result, I kind of started to look into actually incorporating surveillance glass into the work. And so this is a new series that I've been doing, but still using a lot of the elements that I've used in my past work. So there's etched text that is meant to kind of be a way for me to reincorporate Black experience into the work. And then these instances of enfoldment I use to kind of create these different zones of opacity and transparency. And what's interesting about this type of glass is that it has a mirrored element on the back, but when it's fired in the kiln, essentially the film breaks and kind of shifts in color. So it kind of creates another layer of kind of opacity and transparency that's built into the material itself. So does that kind of answer the question? I feel like I was meandering a little bit.
Well, another interesting part is the process that you go through with the kiln firing and altering the glass and like the balance between like precision and unpredictability. And how do you like navigate that tension with the work? Mm-hmm. I mean, one, you're removing the function from its original, but then also it's like this balance between your teetering on collapse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So research is a big part of my practice, and I feel like that's a way for me to kind of ground the work in a way that allows me to be more spontaneous when it comes to like manipulating the material. I'm not trained as a glass artist at all, and so my approach is kind of very, I embrace the kind of moments of, I guess, chance or where the material essentially resists what I think I want it to do. And so this piece is a perfect example of that, where the first panel, I hot folded it while in the kiln, but it came out of an accident where my tool got stuck to the glass, and I essentially was rolling it to try to get it off, and it resulted in this really beautiful enfoldment that I couldn't have like imagined doing it. And so I think that those moments in my work are really important. So I feel like there's a lot of like openness.
And you mentioned before like the folds and everything with referencing like the body folds, and is that, since you're working with the glass and that kind of performance, like, you know, it becomes reflective in the material as you're working with it?
I think.
Hello?
Yeah. Hold on. Well, so I'll just start to ask more about the materials in the iterative process, because of, you know, with the fold and the balance between, and also there's a lot of collaboration in your work because you're working with, you know, different groups and everything. Once we get your mic. So could you, I mean, to kind of continue that like question, but could you share like what your studio practice looks like when you're creating this work and this collaboration with these, because you have to go to, you don't have a kiln in your studio. There's also collapse beyond to where you have iteration or reuse in your works. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how you started to incorporate that into the practice?
Yeah, so all of my work is very much inspired by thinking through essentially like the Black experience in Black life. And I'm really interested in thinking about things like repetition and concealment as tactics of Black resistance. And I came to start to think about repetition as a form of resistance in and thinking about things like blues and the use of the cover and the way that at least blues within, I kind of think of it as like a kind of epistemology of Black interior life, where certain things are coded and kind of reorganized and dismantled and reformulated through this use of repetition. And so that's essentially was the impulse for me to use repetition in my work. And so that shows up in different ways from, like you mentioned, some pieces that I've had that have collapsed. I've reincorporated those elements into new work. And then I also use past photographic series that kind of come back into more recent work. So yeah, repetition is a huge part of my methodology in making work.
And how does like the choice of concrete and lead, which are often propping up the glass elements?
Yeah.
You know, so there's like these architectural references. So could you elaborate on your choices between using those materials with the glass?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about architecture quite a bit in my work, and it kind of like feeds into the material research that I was doing with glass. And so, and I also think about architecture as another form of, or expression of certain kind of ideologies of surveillance. And so I've been using, essentially materials that would reference architecture like concrete, and then more recently lead as a way to kind of, I guess, call back to that, to like the kind of architectural element that's influencing the work. And I started working with lead specifically so that I could continue this element of enfoldment from the glass into the base that supports it. But yeah, so I'm very like intentional with the materials that I use.
Yeah. And the works are always shifting as I, witness you manipulating the lead in the gallery the other day to make sure that glass was propped up. And Charisse is fearless when it comes to using her own materials and everything. So Shaunté, I wanted to come back to you and to talk more about like the imagery that you feature in your work, often incorporating like friends, family, acquaintances as central figures, and how do these like personal connections like shape the narratives in your work?
Yeah, so I guess so. The main spirit in the process is realizing the potential in everything around me. So I surround myself with all these materials, and people that are around me at the time become part of the work. Say, for instance, the piece that you previously showed, a guy in a piece. While I was working on that piece, my niece was the female figure in that piece, and the guy was my Uber Eats driver, and he dropped some food off, and I was like, would you like to come upstairs and take some photos? He was looking like, But he ended up doing it. I gave him gave him some boots, and I told him, I was like, you're gonna be a charioteer. So act like your man in his chariot, and and it turned into all things my friend to this day. So it's about relationships and layers, and just just really being open to everything that's around at the time. So I look at them as we get into like how I think about these figures navigating these spaces. So it's like, how do you navigate this labyrinth of social constructs, like the psychological part of it, but the physical structures that house and perpetuate these constructs. So, so I always look at them. So the pieces they're theatrical. I look at them as the stages. So sometimes you'll see curtains and they're floors, but they're like sets, you know? So I'm building, like actually some of the pieces, I build columns inside of the studio, photograph them, and put them inside of the pieces. The video piece that's in there, there are pieces in the studio that I photographed or video. My son's in there. Like, it's a combination of video game. It's everything, you know, navigating this. So I look at it as this, these things that have shaped your perception of who you are or who you think you are, and of others. So how do you navigate your way through those things that made you, that casted you into this role, in a sense? Like, how do you come out of that to become who you really are? And so it's always this level of going inside, going to the center of this labyrinth. The only way to come out is to go through yourself, in a sense. So those are the things that I think about when I'm making these works. So those are like the stories that's underneath and over top of the scenes that you see, you know? So a lot of times, so the scenes are really like a part of the protagonist's psyche or awe, you know?
Yeah, I was saying it's like your figures often appear animal-like or mythic entities. And so could you talk a little bit more about the symbolism and how they connect to themes of identity and transformation? Is that?
Nah, it's good. It's a great question. It's a I'm always thinking of like this metamorphosis, this change. Or like the original piece you showed, there was like this cocoon or this chrysalis around her. So it was always like, I knew at some point, so the piece is a story, this continuous story, that she'd have to come out of that and fly, you know? So it's, you know, it's always this transformation or metamorphosis. But to be truthful about the later works that you see these animals. So my son, and I think this is, so he's 9 now, but when he was 3, 4, 5, he had this serious animal collection. And he would line his animals up. It was like hundreds of animals. Like every day he would line them up in a circle. And we would do it. We call it like that. You want to line animals up? So we would sit there and just put them in a circle, you know, and he'll, name them. Like he'll, tell you what all the animals were. And so he gives me, like some of the pieces, he even told me one piece I did, it was, I put a cassowary in a piece. He was like, I was like, Biko, I need a bird. What kind of bird is it, you know? And he looked at it and he was like, it's a cassowary, and walked away. And I'm like, what the fuck? What's a cassowary, you know? And he came and he showed me. We put it up on the computer, and I was like, that's it. You know, so it's really just, like I said, everything that's around, just being aware and open to it. So I've realized that those animals, man, like when it was crazy when I realized it, because I don't realize this at the time. Like even working at like I didn't know it until I looked back. He was the show we used to watch, Wildcrafts. And these brothers would travel around the world and transform themselves into different animals to fit into these different habitats and show you how to survive in these habitats. And I realized that these humans, like these hybrid with these animal hybrids, was like probably influenced by that show we would watch all the time. Because I don't know, it just started. I didn't overthink that. It just let it happen. I felt like, I think I started to turn like these figures into these barn owls. Was the first time I really realized that hybridity happening with the figures. And then you start finding things and realizing like these Congolese ancestral masks look like these owl faces. And so all these things start to make sense, you know? I don't know, so it's like finding my way through it and realizing these things along the way that guides you through and tell you that you're on the right track. So let's keep going this way, because that means something else, you know?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to switch. So Charisse, you've described like this body of work as like collapsing temporal boundaries. Like, can you walk us through like how you use time as a medium and process, and how that manifests in your work?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the way that I kind of think about this kind of collapse of kind of periods and moments is through this use of repetition. So, like for instance, with this piece, the tempered glass panel that's essentially like the barrier between both sides of the sculpture came from a balanced glass installation that I did in, I think, 2016. Well, actually, the original one was in 2016, but I've kind of redone it. It's had different iterations. But these panels actually come from a show that I did at Recess in Brooklyn. And that installation actually collapsed at the very end of the exhibition. But I kept all of the panels, and they've essentially been reincorporated into different work. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of think of when that happens as being like this way in which, I guess the kind of questions that I was posing in the original work become embedded in this kind of new formulation. Mm-hmm. So I guess this piece would be, you could think of it as having like 3 generations of work kind of embedded into it.
Mm-hmm. And the transparency of the glass, like you mentioned or you described in a previous interview, as inverting transparency.
Yeah, specifically with the surveillance glass. Like I said, when it's fired, essentially like the side that is supposed to be opaque becomes transparent, and vice versa. So it's essentially like inverting the original, I guess, use value of the material. And I think also with my use of glass and the use of enfoldment, it also kind of creates these different zones, like I mentioned, of opacity that are so oftentimes very surprising with a panel that is transparent. So I like to kind of try to use the material to push against itself.
Yeah, and also upstairs, there's a trio of these works together. So when you're coming to view, like there's different, sometimes you might be viewing through, depending on the angle of the work and the spatial, you could be looking through 2 or 3 planes or 1 plane at a time. Could you talk a little bit about the scale that you used and also the placement of the works? Because I know in the Whitney Biennial you had a whole sheet ceiling of glass hovering over the viewer. I mean, they did have a little line preventing you from walking under it, but it did, you know, beg that like it was this tilted roof, like was in partial collapse. But also just, could you talk about like how the scale changes and your use of that?
Yeah, so I that the piece that I did at the Whitney Biennial was again one where I was reusing materials from a past installation. It was actually the solo show that I had at the Queens Museum in 2022. And that was my first time using or doing a piece at that scale. And I kind of think of these large-scale installations as a way to kind of intervene in the architecture of the space in a way that I otherwise have not been able to. And so with both of those pieces, I was thinking about the idea of risk, of collapse, but then also the ways in which architecture and installation can kind of reconfigure space or redelineate space and redelineate the ways in which we can navigate through space. and so yeah, I think of the large scale pieces as an opportunity to kind of I guess take some of the ideas that I've been working with and just I guess I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, just have a different kind of engagement with space that the smaller scale work I feel like is more of a there's more of a it has a different relationship to the body.
Yeah, I mean, with me, when I walked through and I saw the biennial piece, I mean, there was a lot more tension and immersive feel, like it was going to collapse.
Yeah.
Whereas the sculptures upstairs, and also just the architecture of the space itself, it seems more intimate, like more of the interior
Yeah.
kind of space. So, you know, I thought it was interesting how you were playing, or you just navigated seamlessly between the two scales. I did want to, you know, talk also too, because you are a writer as well, and in one of the pieces upstairs there's text inscribed, but you know, you kind of obscure, I mean, through the kiln process there, you obscure the legibility of the text. And so I just, you know, what is your relationship just with language, using language in general with your art, and how does it function in your work?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in poetics, and I kind of think of poetics as another way to kind of engage with this idea of opacity and the interior. And so a lot of the text that I write has like semi-autobiographical elements, and then sometimes there's like an incorporation of historical text of some description, or from essentially found text that relates to the work. But my engagement with language is really thinking about, I guess, dismantling meaning and creating. I guess I think a lot about the work of Edward Glissant and what he's written about the importance of opacity and engaging with the other. And so I think of like poetry as a way to kind of, that there's essentially opacity that's built into poetry. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's my, that's one of the things that motivates my use of language.
And does the fragmentation come into that? I mean, one is like you look at text, especially when it's not legible, it's more of a visual.
Yeah.
Becomes more visual, but also it, I mean, like with you and Shaunté using many different layers and incorporating like found objects and reusing materials and iteration through to kind of build up these layers. And could you just speak a little on how that transferred from the 3D to the 2D in your works on canvas that you have upstairs?
Yeah. But I also wanted to, because you did ask me about the legibility of the text. And so, like I said, I'm interested in Black interior life. And so for me, like etching of the text onto the surface of the glass, and that you can only get, you know, kind of certain sections that are legible, to me is a representation of the ways in which we can never fully know the interior of other people. So for me, that kind of push and pull between legible and illegible is meant to kind of essentially convey that I guess fact of social engagement, I guess. And so the two-dimensional work comes directly out of the installation work. It's a series that I started in 2016 when I was in grad school. And they are developed from documentation photography of past installations that I then render. Initially, the first version of them, I rendered them black and white, printed them on canvas, and cut into them using the broken shards of past work that collapsed. And so there's certain elements of that that I'm still engaging with, but with these newer pieces, I'm layering different photographs of different work onto one another, and so that's why there's like, instead of it being all black and white, I have these elements of different colors and things like that that are incorporated in there. And then with these, I've also started to incorporate crushed glass or frit. So that's where some of like the kind of colored glass elements come from.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I did notice it's like from your earlier, like more black and white works that you've incorporated more color, but it still seems to be based in the palette of the materials, like the inherent colors of the materials themselves. So there's a certain type of, I guess, honesty in a way with that. So, you know, still using, Shaunté is still using like with the found objects and your history textbook pages that we see in some of the works, you know, and the mass media imagery that you've kind of like touched upon, you know, suggests like a dialogue between history and the present. How do you approach like integrating these elements into your work, and what do you hope like the viewer can take away from that?
Well, first, I think it's really like, so I use like, I started using U.S. history textbook paper to like, just to create a substrate. And when I think about text and how it, the power of it, you know, and how everything, our laws, everything's written in these like, history books. You know, this is what we're, you know, teaching our kids, this written thing. So it's something about taking that, breaking it down, deconstructing it. I don't know. But it was just, that's like this history book I had from high school that I had, and it was just like, all right, let's use this and try to figure out, what we can build on top of it and create. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't put too much thought into that, as you know.
Well, it seems like you just have this freedom of experimentation to where, and then the textbooks, so you cut them out and they become like
and sure, all
poppies
these things.
and different windswept. I mean, because I was looking at one piece, the year of the socks, where it had dictionaries, Bible pages, and
so all these, so all that text is charged, and how do you take all these things that have stories already attached to them, right? So how do all these things come together to give us that one moment, that one story? It's kind of how I look at it, you know. You know, and then I'm into like the duality of everything, and I'm kind of going a little off here, but you have brought up the poppies, and like my original reason, or I remember the first time I used the poppies in the work. I mean, I've been using the poppies in my works for over the last 13 years, and I can't stop using them. I just can't. So the first, and it's because I think about the complexities, duality, and so I kind of like the paradox of the poppies. Started using it with thinking about the communities that I grew up in, and war on drugs that was waged on these communities. So a lot of you see this reflection of war in the pieces. It has a lot to do with that. Well, I think about this flower, right? This beautiful flower that produces this substance that, when manufactured a certain kind of way, can cripple a whole community. You know what I mean? But this flower is used to commemorate soldiers who lost their lives to war. So some irony there. At the same time, wars were fought over our over this flower, right? So it's something really interesting about this poppy. So it can mean so many different things. I mean, even to the point of the medicinal purposes of like a soldier that's injured in war, right? So that's like, and it's a lot of layers there. And so that's just how I think about everything. Everything in the works is not, it means more than, it has to mean at least 2 or 3 things in order for it to make sense. And if I'm working on a piece and it takes me somewhere, if the story's too coherent, I'm sacrificing it for poetry. Every time, like I'm breaking it and trying to get closer to a truth. Instead of like what I know, I'm not concerned with that. I want to know like, what is it that, it's a feeling, and that's how I know I'm in the right place. Well, sometimes people ask, like, how do you know when it's done? It's that feeling when you, I don't know. I don't, but I can feel it,
I think a lot of times it's done when somebody takes it out of the studio. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
no doubt.
And I mean, I noticed that you use a lot of architectural elements in your work too, and the imagery, and like just with the piece that we're looking at now, like Josh and the River, which features some of the themes that you just talked about, and how the architecture is like wading through.
Yeah. I think like I think about a lot of these places I grew up in, man, and they were like war zones as a kid. And so even this piece, thinking about the uniforms or the clothing, what we wore inside of those environments, these brand names, and like you see a Washington football logo on the side of this helmet. I mean, but this is so many layers. It's hard to look at one piece and really, like, this is about this journey upriver. This whole series is like thinking about taking imagery from cinema, Apocalypse Now. And so I'll say this. So when I'm getting into the series, it's a constellation that I'm trying to find. So it's all these different things that, so I had this movie, Apocalypse Now, that I was into, when realized that Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness inspired this movie, this journey up the Congo River, inspired the movie Apocalypse Now. I didn't know that, but when I found that out, I'm like, okay, something here. And then at the time, I had this photo of my father. Only photo, I just discovered who he was at the time. Only photo I had of him was this photo of him during Vietnam. He served in Vietnam. It's the only photo I had of him. So it was like this connection here, Vietnam, this Apocalypse Now, the movie, and Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So these lines are starting to form here. And there's a couple other things that really filled it out. And so I'm like, okay, I have something here to start a series. And so it became like this introspective just journey upriver, into the heart of thinking about society. Like, we got to get into that darkness. We got to go through the shadow to get to, so you got to go through it, So I was just thinking about those things. I don't know. I don't even know if I answered your question.
I think you did. I was just trying to get you to talk.
Okay.
That's all. No. I kind of wanted to wrap up with a question for both of you, but with Charisse, I wanted to, reference this public art project you did with Jamal Cyrus, and this is outside of is it outside the Moody, or is it on Rice University campus?
So this is a project that we did for the African American Library at the Gregory School.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like in 4th Ward, which is a historically black neighborhood in Houston.
And this was for the first black woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, Barbara C. Jordan.
Yeah.
And I mean, working on a public art project is and collaborating with Jamal is very much different than working on your practice. And just, could you elaborate on that process, but also just where it was and the site and how that affected your decisions.
Yeah. So Jamal is a Houston-based artist, and we have like very similar sensibilities in terms of making. And so, in that sense, like working on the project with him was like, you know, it was an honor because I am a huge fan of his work, but also it was just nice to kind of like share ideas. Especially as we both work conceptually and are both thinking about Black life, Black experience, and it was really exciting to do this project. It was the first monument in Houston, permanent monument in Houston for Barbara Jordan, who was from Houston. And so one of the things that we were really interested in was finding a way to incorporate her voice into you know, essentially a sculpture. And so we ended up going through her archive. And lucky for us, she hand wrote a lot of her speeches. And so we were able to take certain elements from her well-known speeches and then lesser-known speeches and incorporate them into the work. And then we also sourced images of her as a child and incorporated images of her constituents because she was very much interested in the idea of justice working for the people. And yeah, so we just kind of created, I guess, pinpointed different iconographic elements to incorporate into the piece, to try to tell us the story, albeit truncated, of her life. And we ended up working with a glass studio in Germany because we couldn't find a studio in the U.S. that worked at this scale with glass. And so working with them was really exciting. So there's a lot of hand-painted elements in the glass as well as photographic components. Yeah, so it was a great project to work on. Took a long time, though.
Yeah. Did you bring any of that back into the studio afterwards, or was it kind of seemed like it was on its own?
Yeah, it's kind of, just because they have equipment that I don't have access to. But it was interesting to see the way that they essentially layered different elements, like the painting over the printed material. And because we used laminated glass, so there's multiple layers of the glass. So the way that they're kind of able to push and pull and create the sense of depth within one panel of glass is really interesting to me. One day, if I have a kiln and I guess a glass printer like that.
Just get a trip to Germany.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Yeah. And Shaunté, kind of with all the public murals that you've worked on in the DC area, how were those experiences like compared to your paintings and the collaborations that you did during this process?
They were different than the challenge was for the public art pieces was because when I'm making, paintings in the studio, I'm not thinking about the audience,
Yeah.
and so, these public art pieces, you have to take everything into consideration. So it's a bit of a challenge. I've done, I guess, over the last 5-6 years, about 10 public art pieces in a lot of DC public schools. And just really, it's just a different way of thinking, just really have to take into consideration everybody, And so, yeah, I mean, it was a cool experience, doing those works, and I'm happy to be able to still give them, my ideas, but in a way that they, everybody can, receive them. So, challenge was there, but it was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple of minutes left, so I would, like to open up to the audience if anybody has any questions for Charisse or Sean. Christina, you raising your hand? Okay.
I have a question for both artists, but start with Shaunté. Your work, especially the most recent ones, they really make me think of dreams. And recently I've been really paying attention to my dreams, and there's times where I can be so emotionally invested in it, and so much is happening. And then I wake up and I'm like, whoa, that didn't make any sense to my conscious mind, because especially the one with the, I guess, bird woman or whatever, and then there's all these like little scenes that are sort of being unveiled with a lot going on. And something that you said was you try not to really make it into a narrative or really make a meaning of it, which in dream analysis is really the dream, they call the dream ego, like my opinion of the dream is actually the thing you don't want to pay attention to, because the dream maker, the unconscious that came up with these images to give you is trying to tell you something.
Absolutely.
And I just wonder, is your inner life or dreams or anything like that, is it an inspiration for these?
Absolutely. That's a great, I mean, every piece that I do goes through some form of, like I'll go to sleep on purpose just to find things. I call it going fishing. And, like when I met my wife early on, she was like, I have work to do, and I'm like, I'm going to sleep. She's like, you need to get up, you got work, And I mean, I am working, And it really is a part of the process, and it's something that, since 2004, when my mom passed, it just became a thing. And I don't know if it was because it was like, this is where I could see her in these dreams, but it became a thing where I trust these visions that I was getting. I'll tell you a story. I had this vision. It was a bird. It was like it was dead, but it had like this one wing up, so it was like severely injured. I kept having this vision of it. And it wasn't like in this deep dream, but it was like when you're in that somnolent state, like before you go to sleep. And after, it was like I kept seeing this. And I had to get ready for a show, and I was like, I had painter's block for 2 years after my mom passed, and I didn't know what to paint. But I knew I had a friend of mine. She was like, you got to paint that. Because like you got to paint the first thing that comes to your mind, and it was just kept seeing that. So I painted it, and it was the most liberating thing that I've ever done, as far as, I mean, just anything. And so really, I started to really trust like these visions, and like when I'm in that space, and when I'm like, I go like, I don't know, every piece that I've done, over the last 20 years, they go through the dream process some kind of way, and I'm not even looking for the visuals like I was talking about that particular piece. Now it's a natural thing. I'll go to sleep thinking about a piece, knowing that I'm gonna find it in that dream somewhere, So all of them go through it, and I'm looking for different things. It's a feeling that I'm looking for. So it's like this energy and scene. I call it finding, like I'm looking for the pulse. So I'll take like, this piece with me to sleep. I'm taking it to sleep with me just so I can find that pulse, like that thing. It might be one thing. It might be a poppy petal flying in the air, just landing right on somebody's face, a certain kind of way that gives the piece everything it needs. So that's, so yes, great question. It's definitely a part of the process. It's the most crucial part of the process. So it's a perfect question.
It's amazing to capture the images. A lot of people say, I don't dream, but no, we're dreaming every night.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that you captured them and made them so vivid.
And what's great, like it's just like any dream. Like I'll go into the studio, like sometimes, like say like going fishing, you might not catch it, but I'll go into the studio the same day, and as I'm working, somehow I know I need to do this, and I'm like, oh, I probably saw it in that dream. You know what I mean? And so it's like, we all dream, and then we see these things later, and you're like, you don't remember your dream, but then later on and during the day, you be like, So it's the same way, Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Is that Mandy back there?
I want to ride on Christina's question a little bit more to Shaunté. I feel lucky that over the last 2 days I've probably watched and listened to your video collage, definitely more than everybody in this room, but about 12 or 13 times all the way through now.
Yeah.
So riding on that, experiencing, especially just closing my eyes after watching it a couple of times and listening to your audio collage.
Yeah.
I do audio editing as well.
Mm.
And so knowing your background being in film and television with BET, and I imagine maybe Channel 6 too, right? Is that why the 6 is on the film?
No.
Oh, okay. So I was just wondering, being able to close my eyes and listen to your audio seems dream state as well, but I was wondering if you could speak about how you actually came up with that video, audio. It matches, it's perfect. It's so complementary to each other.
Yeah.
If you would just speak on your process of how you collected all those images and
Yeah.
how they speak to each other, both audio and visually.
Yeah, well, it just came from just working in, so I worked for, primarily when I worked in television, I was working for a music video show called Soul Session. And so, you know, these record labels would send these graphic packages and like photos, video, and just anything that they wanted to include in the specials that I was creating. And so I would have to like put all of these things, the still photos mixed with this B-roll footage, and create graphics to tie this, to create a story. And so like it just like it kind of fed into the works. And then so when I stopped working in television, I had to do a piece for it was American University in D.C. It was a show depicting that was celebrating the Black Panther Party and their in their 50th anniversary. And so I thought doing a video piece would be a way that I can tell, so we can hear their voice and hear what they really had to say. So the first piece I created was a video piece that I created as a piece of art, was that piece, and I called it Free Breakfast Program, which was based off their periodical that they had, and or a program that they started with giving, you know, kids, you know, free breakfast across the country. Like it spread across the country. They were doing it in Oakland and Chicago, I believe. But anyway, yeah. So just taking that same software I was using in television and just to create that piece, and you know, just pulling pieces from offline, using photography of a video of footage that I'll take, and just mixing a little bit of everything. And like that, so what you see, that video, it's in there, it's a compilation. So it's a video that I've done over the last, since 2014. And I just keep working on it. So it's like this digital sketchbook. It's not even, I just keep building on it. And so now it's like pieces from like video games, you know, taking the pieces from pieces of art that I've painted. So it's like the paintings and the video pieces just kind of feed each other, you know? Yeah. You know?
Margaret?
For Charisse, I'm so struck by your choice of glass, which is such a fragile medium, and yet, of course, your pieces have this incredible heft and power. And I wonder, you know, hearing about the themes that you already spoke about, I wonder, you know, what drew you to glass itself, and what are the special challenges of working with that medium?
Yeah, so I originally started working with glass. Really, I was trying to solve a design or display issue that I had with these text and photography pieces that I was doing. where I wanted to display them horizontally with essentially layering these text elements onto photographs. And I ran into the issue that like galleries wanted to show the work, but they didn't want to show it like that because of, I guess, fear of, I don't know, it blowing away or something. So I was trying to think of ways that I could add weight to the work, but not kind of, I guess, disrupt the kind of conceptual integrity of it. And so I started incorporating sheets of glass. And from there, I realized that it imparted, this element of risk, of fragility, that I realized kind of spoke to some of the things that I was thinking about in relationship to Black experience. And so that was the beginning of me working with glass. So that kind of developed into me doing these balanced glass installations. And then I discovered that you can mold glass and slump it. And so that kind of opened up a whole, another, set of possibilities. But yeah, what really drew me to it was the fact that it kind of fit within, I guess, the conceptual framework that I was already working in, because I was already interested in transparency and thinking about opacity as well. I think in terms of like difficulties with working with the material, I think the main thing is, it kind of resists you doing things to it. But I've kind of learned to kind of accept that kind of resistance that I get. And it kind of forces me to be open to chance within the work, which to me is really exciting.
Christine?
I have a question along these lines too for you. So, conceptually, could you speak a little bit more about, your inspiration about Black inner life and how that is behind your work? And also, I'm wondering, with your themes of things like surveillance and transparency and opacity, does that have anything to do with any of maybe the AI things that are coming out with surveillance around people and detecting if someone's Black or not, or whatever? If there's contemporary things in that, or is this most of your work centered on the emotional sort of experience?
I think in terms of my interest in surveillance, I'm really interested in like the kind of ideological apparatuses that essentially reinforce the use of surveillance, and in particular the use of surveillance within like anti-Black ideologies, really. And so I'm very interested in like the kind of ideological ways in which surveillance is used. So less interested in AI at the moment, could be later, we'll see.
Some of the images look very sort of fragmented, especially the works that are they on paper, I think it is, and I'm wondering if if you're trying to make a message of the fragmentation that may be there on the inner life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fragmentation is like a big part of my practice, because I essentially use it as a mechanism to abstraction, and yeah, I'm trying to think of like, I think with the works on canvas, because they're photographic pieces, at their base, a lot of the elements that I use in terms of working with photography is about kind of fragmenting the picture plane, and that the reason why I'm interested in that is thinking about like the history of photography and the way it's been used to essentially reinforce certain ideologies around race. And so it's, a material with a lot of baggage. And I'm interested in kind of putting pressure on the ways in which photography is used as a mechanism of telling a certain story, of essentially establishing a certain kind of truth. So a lot of the processes that I use are about like fragmenting it, abstracting it, even though I am working from a, I guess you could say like a representational image, being that it's documentation photography. Did that kind of answer your question? Yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody for coming. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but Charisse and Shaunté's works will be on view here at the Moss until March 30th. And I always welcome anybody to join me on one of our second Thursday tours that'll lead through the galleries. Thank you both for coming here to Virginia Tech and sharing your work with us. Thank you.